You are now live on air.
Alright. It does appear that we are back. We are live. There was, I don't know, a little bit of a broadcaster dump or something there. But everything seems like it's rolling along well. Bars are bumping. Looks like the broadcaster's working. We're starting to see some names filter into the live chat. So, maybe we should get this on the road. We are live, we are back, and you are listening to Beyond Sight and Sound. I am your host, Josh Kimmel, aka Treasure Seeker. Maybe not the Treasure Seeker, but a Treasure Seeker. So, got a couple of quick things. Let's go ahead and kill the music there. A couple of quick things to cover real quick. Saturday, the Vicksburg special. Awesome show. Really great to get the guys on and get that show out. I know the listeners had been waiting on it for a while. And it was good to be back. Great to get the information out. A little bit of a call glitch at the end of the show, but there was an accident about a mile from the house that clipped a pole, and we made a fairly quick recovery and got it all tied up. So that's good. Saturday, though, I had neglected to mention, as I do try to cover some topics as they do arise, for those, which I'm sure most of us have already seen, but for those who may not have, Jim Leonard, editor of Relic Hunter magazine, passed away Saturday morning. And our condolences go out to his family and friends, support, prayers. Jim was a great guy, and he did a lot for the hobby. With the magazine, I had a number of finds published in there myself, as well as a couple of articles. So it's a shame, and the hobby did lose a good friend that day. But our condolences out to his family and friends, the support. He's in a better place now, and all of his finds are great ones. Also, would like to give a quick shout out. I have it on good authority that there is a new listener in the house. First taste of Beyond Sight and Sound tonight. President Bob, Mocan Search and Recovery up there in Kansas City, Missouri. Big into coins and preserving the history, just like the Dirt Bandit. And he's actually listening in tonight. So, any of you in the Kansas City, Missouri area, if you don't know about Mocan Search and Recovery, check them out. They do a monthly meeting. Good group of people. Really good group of people. And speaking of the Dirt Bandit, man, that guy is just tearing it up. Hardcore all the way. He was out yesterday hunting near Shiloh again. Made some nice finds. Very nice finds. which I believe there are a couple of them posted up on his timeline, and there is a video of the hunt up on Beyond Sight and Sound and on YouTube. Search YouTube for Dirt Bandit 33. Check out his latest video. I'm telling you, you're not wasting your time. He does a great job with his videos. Really good guy to talk to. You've heard him on the show a number of times. Good friend of mine. And if you're an Amazon shopper, why not shop through Hardcore Relic Recovery at hardcorerelicrecovery.com. Amazon widget on the right hand side of the page. Just type what you're looking for into the search bar and go to town. Make your purchases through there if you're going to go anyway. You never know. You'll find what you're looking for, I'm sure. Amazon's got a lot of stuff. And with that, you ever stop and think, caches, they could be anywhere. Maybe it's in the ground, maybe it's in the wall, floorboard, tree, fireplace, post hole, under a rock, corner of the barn. You just never know. And a big thing with that, much like it is with our metal detecting, sometimes people stumble across these things, but if you go specifically looking for them, you want to be properly armed. And one of the biggest assets to be properly armed in any sort of search and recovery is the mindset that chance favors preparedness. It's truism, folks. Think about it. When you're better prepared for a situation, whether that situation's going to happen or not, you're more apt to deal with it if it arises. And you want to be as well informed or as capable as possible to recover said cache if it's there still, and if it existed to begin with. But ultimately, in the long run of it all, the only way you're gonna know is to get out there and dig it. So with that in mind, I'd like to bring in my guest. Mr. Jim Fielding has had over 48 and a half years in the hobby, written a number of articles for various publications, and his time in the hobby has given him quite a number of experiences and some interesting stories to go along with that. Even a few along the lines of cache hunting. And he's a return guest, great guy to talk to. Let's get him in here and see what's going on. How's it going, Jim?
Hey, Josh. Nice to be back. How you doing?
All right, not too bad. Not as warm as you guys are down there, but hey, we're getting by. 6 more weeks.
Well, you know, it's going down to 73 tonight, and I've got my extra special woolies on for that, man. That's low, and it may go down as low as 65. So we're splitting some logs ready for the fireplace here. Man, we can't go below 65, or you know, we're just going to have to close the house up and turn the heat on. I mean, wow.
Yeah.
You guys, I don't know how you survive up there. You guys, is that where we send all our surplus NASA spacesuits up to you guys? Because I don't know how you could walk outside otherwise, man.
It could be. Matter of fact, a few weeks ago, it got down in the lower 30s, I believe, in Mississippi. But the diligent ones down there were all right because they own jackets.
Yeah. Yep. Well, you know, we have ordinances too. We're not allowed to have, weather is not allowed to go below 65 degrees here in Central Florida, here in Orlando, where we live here, and you're pretty much year round. Where I used to live in Fort Lauderdale, it wasn't allowed to go below 75. You know, that's the rules.
Well, see, so anyway, I guess that's the problem. I need to get on some legislation, get some ordinance passed up here in Ohio like that.
Darn right. Well, here, I guess we're going to talk about the art of cache hunting.
Yes,
Okay.
sir.
All right, well, let's get to it then, as they say in some station I heard out in L.A. said that. The beginning of caches are a form, probably the form of treasure hunting. Now, you know, we talk a lot about metal detecting, and let's go with a metal detector, which is a hobby, as it were, you know, and go find some coins, a couple of rings, some kids' toys, you know, some jewelry here and there, and pretty nice hobby. It pays you back. But as I said during the last program, we, you know, I saw this on somebody's site the other day on Facebook, and they said something about, well, don't expect to get rich with your metal detector, and I'm always like, why not? Why don't you expect to get rich? Because the stuff is out there, and a lot of people
absolutely.
a lot of people pretty much a downer, like, you're not going to play with that, there's nothing left. Well, that's not true. There's lots and lots of stuff out there, and I always love treasure projects. And almost every, like you were talking about, every secreted treasure somewhere is literally a cache. You know, I talked last time about Kevin Riley and I when we went down. That guy had buried the guy's great-grandfather buried like six milk cans full of gold coins, and nobody could find them. And we actually went down and we found 3 of them. I think I spoke about that last time, but that's a cache.
Yeah, we did touch on that a little bit. 3 milk cans, I believe you had recovered, and
yeah, they're like 5-gallon cans. You know?
That had to have been just a phenomenal recovery in its own. I mean, what a feeling, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, he had a 40-acre ranch. I mean, we were out there for like 7 or 8 days looking for this stuff, and we were using 2-box detectors. We weren't using your run-of-the-mill 8 to 11-inch coil. We were using big machines, and we finally got a hit on part of the property. And how we found them was we were sitting around going, and this is pretty important in cache hunting. You have to start thinking. If you're going to hunt caches, you got to get rid of your 21st century mindset. You need to start thinking like a 19th century citizen. Not even the 20th century, early 20th century citizens were basically your late 19th century citizens, like most of us today are mostly 20th century citizens in the beginning of the 21st. So it all crosses the century boundary there. They all thought they didn't think electronics. I mean, today, honestly, do you carry any cash with you today? Do we use hard currency today in any real manner? No. The answer is no.
Right, a lot of people do not. Most people carry plastic. They do electronic transactions.
Right.
Myself, I do try to carry some cash, but that's because I've kind of got the old school mentality, and I'm a stacker to boot.
Well, it never hurts to have a few C-notes in your pocket, but overall, if you do carry cash nowadays, you don't carry much. You know, and back in the late 19th, the currency, a lot of currency were coins. You know, big old silver, nice and hard, and you know, you see the old movies where somebody would give somebody money and they'd bite it to see if it was wood. You know.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Counterfeit, right? Coins out of wood, and they'd bite them, and if it broke their tooth off, they knew they were getting paid. You know. But at any rate,
you can only do that so many times, though.
Yeah, true. Good point. So the way you think about that, and a lot of it depended on who the person was that secreted the cache. You know, people, and I'm not trying to sound class conscious here. I'm just talking about the sociological ladder of people. You know, the people that were doctors and lawyers and things back in the 19th century were very learned men then. I mean, they knew calculus and they understood biology as far as it went, spoke 4 languages. They were pretty smart cookies. You know, they knew geometry, and when they would secrete a cache, they used a little bit more, I guess, a little bit more prowess in figuring out a more complex way to hide it. That only
they may have taken a little more of a mathematical or scientific approach to it.
Right, and that's important. If you do research on a property, you want to know who was there. If it was a Dr. Phillips, you have to think a little bit more I don't know how to put it, a little bit higher level than somebody who was just a dirt farmer, and they wanted to be able to get that cash and get out. If the barn caught fire, they wanted to get that thing and get out of there. And back then, of course, nobody trusted banks, which is odd, right? I mean, who could be more honest than a banker? So, right? So
Right.
Caches take many forms that people don't really think about because they don't think in a 19th century way. They think in a 21st century. A lot of people are late 20th century people, you know, who were born in the latter part of the 20th century, and now they're just in their 20s now, you know. So they don't think at all. They don't even think early 20th century. You know, they're strictly plastic and computers, et cetera, et cetera. Well, the old salt of the earth there, they would look at common places to bury things, and they didn't bury them deep. You know, usually somebody says, well, you know, guys, you're using two box detectors, which detect, you know, anywhere between 8 to 10 feet, depending on the size of the target that you're searching for. But most of the caches that were secreted by people of modest means were, you know, a cigar box wrapped up in oilcloth with a couple of family heirlooms in it, coins, in a lot of cases gold coins, because gold coins were legal, I think, up until the 1930s when they were made illegal. So there were still $20 gold coins, which today are worth quite a bit of money.
Right.
People don't think about that. You know, they're like, oh, look, I found a silver dollar. You know, it's a Franklin half, or, you know, and, you know, a couple of feet away could be buried a wooden box or a mason jar filled to the brim with about, you know, $5,000 worth of coins and artifacts. So
Exactly.
first so you have to think along the lines of the 19th century, and usually you can say, well, where would you bury something you didn't want anybody else to find? Okay?
Exactly. You have to kind of put yourself in the shoes of the secreter, so to speak.
But it's kind of like being a detective, you know. And you know, actually, to me, that's the fun part of it. You know, it's great waving the detector around, listening for signals, and you know, digging stuff and pinpointing, and you know, all that sort of thing. But to me, again, in treasure hunting, that's just another tool like the shovel. And I know it's blasphemous to say that in today's technical world, but it's like, you know, a shovel or a blacklight or a mortar kit or a carpenter saw you bring with you to some of these kits when you hunt these old houses.
Exactly. They're all assets to the toolkit.
Right.
They're all a
tools.
means to an end.
That's right. We used to call them instruments. We didn't even call them metal detectors. We said the instruments. Let's get out the instruments and hunt.
Right.
But,
time to perform the operation.
Right. So. Oh, you know what? I'll bet you don't know, and I'll bet none of your listeners know the answer to this question. I just came up with this because I saw it the other day on Netflix, and it just hit me. It's the classic cache movie. There's a movie about a cache that was real popular in the early '60s, and it had some great imagery in there. And the very end of it was where they located the cache, and there was a very prominent feature in that movie that they were all looking for, because I think it had Jimmy Durante in it. He was a criminal. He ran off the road and he almost died. He'd been in prison for years, and he said, you know, when they all got off the road to help him, it had all this Mickey Rooney and everybody in it, and they asked him, you know, he said, you gotta get this. I buried this, and he told them where to find it. So the whole movie is them trying to get to where he told them it would be buried, and what to look for is a landmark to spot it. I bet you don't know the name of it.
No, I don't actually. I'm drawing a blank on that one.
Okay, well, if you ever get to see it, it was made in 1963, and it was called "It's a Mad, Mad World." With Milton Berle, and the whole point of the movie was to find this cache of money that this criminal had buried, and they went all over the place trying to locate the signs. I mean, it was a comedy, but I mean, the point was that it kind of shows you how esoteric a landmark you can use to reference a cache that was buried to recover it.
That's right, because landmarks are used in many cases.
Right, and landmarks change over time. So,
yes, they do.
Yeah, so a lot of the number one, the first rule of burying a cache is you want to dig a hole where nobody's going to see you, right? If you're going to bury it in the ground, you're not going to be in the front yard. So if you see a house, there's a road going by. It could have been a dirt road with, who knows back then, wagons and horses dragging. You don't want to be sitting in a front yard digging a hole and throwing a bunch of money in the hole. I'm pretty sure everybody was pretty, there weren't much Facebook, wasn't a lot of Facebook activity back in 1890. It was mostly by, coming over to the neighbor and like, hey, Paul, what are you doing over there with a shovel and a big jar of money, And then that went through town like wildfire because people would talk. So first rule of cache hiding is don't bury it where people can see you, And number two
out of
is
prying eyes.
Right, and number two is you want it to be easy to recover in an emergency, like your house is on fire, or the Union Army's coming through firing at you, or the Confederates are coming. You need to be able to get that thing out of the ground and get out of there. So
that's right. In some cases, they were actually very elaborately hid, but in many cases, more often than not, these were designed to be easily recovered within a matter of minutes.
Right. They needed to get them, and they need to get them now. So how would you do that? There's a very simple method that both the highly educated and the not so smart would use. Was what we talked about, the line of sight type of thing, where you would, and I was telling Jerry Hickson this one day, and he's our webmaster for the club, and I was talking about how to locate a cache using, and you don't have to use carpenter string. You go find a backyard in an old farm or fallen down house. You take a look for some major landmarks. A couple of trees, maybe the foundation of a barn, and you start triangulating on them. If you know anything about triangulation, if you're a pilot like I was, if you got lost somewhere, we used to use VOR Omni Range, which are radio beams. We could home in on Okeechobee, West Palm Beach, or whatever. And once you tune those all in, you draw a line to each station, and where all those lines intersected, that's where you were. Well, it's the same technique when you're burying something out in the middle of a yard, where it wouldn't seem like you have any landmarks. You get some carpenter's twine, if you want to be real accurate, and you tie it to the tree you was landmark, and you tie it to the edge of the porch fence, and then two other prominent landmarks, you tie it to there, and then you tie it to the other, and where those two lines intersect, those two pieces of cord intersect, is where you bury your cache. So in most cases, after somebody did that sort of thing and buried something, in their mind's eye, they pretty well knew where they buried it, because there were no metal detectors, and you had to be careful, because a lot of things were in glass. They didn't want to break the glass and cut themselves, and they'd never get the whole thing out. So they had to have a pretty good idea where it was buried. And they never buried him, probably. I think the deepest cache, I think just cans we found were like 3 feet deep, which is pretty deep, for anything.
Right.
But it's a lot of people get cache signals, and they'll get a big box signal, and they'll go, that's junk. I'm not digging that, especially out in areas where you don't seem to have that much of a, don't have any trash or anything. You get this big bong of a signal. It's either a tractor transmission or somebody buried something there, and they can be big caches, they can be small caches. You know what I'm saying?
Oh yeah, it could be, as big as a stove kettle or something.
Right.
Maybe even larger, or we could just be talking about, like you said, a little cigar box or a jam jar, a canning jar.
Right. But the end result was it was detectable by a metal detector. Today's technology is able to spot those. And back then, they were just going to go back and eyeball that and say, well, this is about where it should be, and they dig around and in some cases they'd use a pole. If they couldn't quite get it at first, they get a sharpened stick. They go around and they jam the stick in the ground a couple times until they hit the top of the jar, and then they dig it up, and they were in a hurry. And usually, like I said, it was pretty easy to pull up and get out of there if they were an invading army or the barn was on fire or your mother-in-law was coming over. You want to get that stuff out of there, So.
Absolutely. And sometimes these were even cached, like you said, if troops were coming or something like that. Maybe it's enough that they can't really take it with them right then, so they just want to bury it real quick and come back for it. But sometimes, like if I remember right with the backstory with the milk cans, they never got the opportunity to pass that information on as far as the location.
And they were actually, I don't think I finished telling you where they were found. We found them as Kevin and I sat around because we had lots and lots of land that was just blank. And it's like, this is going to calculate how wide that land is, an 11-inch coil, even an 8-inch coil. It's going to take us, about, maybe 5 years if we want to cover every inch.
Right.
So you had to think, you had to think along the lines, this guy doesn't have a metal detector. How is he going to recover it? He's an old man, his memory's probably fading. How is he going to get them? Well,
it's not like he buried it and, put the coordinates in his GPS or something.
Yeah, and we walked the whole ranch. I mean, we were, there's snakes out there, not like in our last evidence on, but there were snakes out there like rattlers and things like that, and rats, and you didn't know what was out there. But we noticed there was a copse of trees near the end of the property. And we talked to the guy who was the great-grandson, and I said, what are those? He goes, oh, well, my grandfather and my grandmother loved fresh oranges, and they planted, I think it was like 10 orange trees, and it was just a small little orange grove. And Kevin's like, hot dog, there's something, and that's where we found 3 of them in that middle of that orange grove. They were cattywampus, well, not cattywampus, I guess that's not really a real term, but between each of it was like 3 or 4, 6, 1, 2, 3. I think there were 6, 7, 8, 9 of them, 9 trees, I think. And they were all 3 in a row, 3 in a row, 3 in a row. And right between 2 of those trees in a row were those cans. That's where we got the signal. And the third one we found on the other side going down another row. And that's all we found. We never found anything else along there. But he had lined them up between the trees of that small orange grove. Because, I mean, how is he going to find it in 40 acres of basically brush and, things that were changing constantly. The horses and the cows would eat the grass, and, lightning would hit the trees, a few trees that there were. So something that had some permanence to it.
Well, that makes sense, though. It's on the back of the property. It's out of sight of bypassers, and it's an area. Another good point is that it's an area of the property that he spent a lot of time at. If he liked those orange trees,
right? I guess he really and the grandson said, why didn't I think of that? I'm like, well, because it was a big time treasure hunters, and you're just a great grandson. That's why. But it was we were looking. You look for a specific unique feature on any site, and you go hunt it. Like when you saw that we found a cache on a Monday video I shot a while back with me and Rob.
Yeah, I included that video in the promo, actually.
Oh, did you? Okay, well, and that was at the base of a tree, and that was a big tree. Pretty big. Well, I guess it was about medium, but it was at the bottom of a tree. It was a marker, and whoever buried it there knew that tree wasn't going to fall down soon, So always, if you're looking for caches, first thing you do is look around trees, look between trees. There was one cache I read about a number of years ago that was up near your neck of the woods, up in Ohio, somewhere. I think it was in Dayton. And this was a very well-to-do doctor or attorney or surgeon or something. And it turns out everybody gone over his property, everybody had been over the property waving detectors. But, it's kind of hodgepodge. They weren't thinking. They were just scanning, and I'm going to keep scanning and I'll hit something. Well, that's kind of a screwball way to look for a cache. I mean, you really should have a plan, and you should look at the property you should look at the property, the shape, and think about it a little bit before you go out there, and start riding off madly in all directions. And it turned out that there were 3 trees, and the 3 trees, if you had done what I talked about, took a cord, and you'd all met exactly in the middle of those 3 trees, just so happened to line up with the chimney on his house or mansion, that was where they got the signal, and that was where he buried all that money. They dug up a couple of $100,000 worth of gold coins.
I was going to say, that sounds very familiar. It was a kettle, I believe.
I think it was. I think it was a kettle.
Yeah.
But, you know, I've heard people from your neck of the woods up there go, there's nothing here, you know, there's nothing for us to look for. But your neck, up where you, the north, the Midwest, and the Northeast, and the, you know, the Northwest, and there's all kinds of caches buried along here and there. And I'm only talking about the ones that are buried in the ground. Like you were saying earlier, there's lots of other type of caches. Now, one of them, and we were talking earlier about one of the tools that treasure hunters, not so much metal detectors, but treasure hunters that are looking for treasure, you know, a windfall, use black lights, or ultraviolet lights as they're called. And ultraviolet lights they're basically two different types of black lights. There's one we call a short wave and a long wave. Right. And their output normally runs from like 4,000 or 4,800 angstroms to around 150 angstroms, which is about the same length as an X-ray. And they have very, very special properties. Matter of fact, if you're out there and you get a sunburn, it's the ultraviolet that's giving you the sunburn. And it's also ultraviolet light creates the vitamins and all the other things, that vitamin D in your system that your system craves. So from sunlight. So it really will stand out in certain situations where even outside in the evening, early dusk, where somebody's dug a hole and replaced it, and it will still fluoresce. You can see it like in the moonlight, or like it's like moonlight shining on a circle. Same with mortar and bricks and mortar. One of the old ways, if you really had something good that you wanted to secrete somewhere from somebody, you go and the brick foundations, they would chisel a brick out, and then they'd split the brick in half. You know, they'd split it, and then in that little cavity, they'd put a cloth or leather pouch with gold coins, silver coins, diamonds, whatever was important to them that they want to hide. Right. Then they would put this back in, and some of them were so smart as to mix a little bit of dirt and things in with the mortar to make it look older, and then they'd patch this little thing in there, and that's where it would stay. And if they got killed in a war, or they died, or had an accident, or went insane, that's still there. Even if the house has been, you know, completely destroyed, a lot of times you'll see, especially again up your way, you'll see foundations that are still in existence. And the way to find those is you walk around them with a black light, and a good black light. You don't want one of cheap little crummy ones that they sell in Brookstone. You want a good one. They actually make now black lights that use black light LEDs that are pretty bright and do a pretty good job.
Yeah. And
you can walk along a foundation at night and shine the black light on it, and you'll see a bright fluorescing square where, and in invisible light you can't tell, but that mortar is newer than the rest of the mortar, and there's a definite color change. You can see like a square, you know. So you're like, hot dog, I wonder what that is. I've had some friends that actually carry with them a chisels and mortar in a little kit, screws and things like that. And when they go looking in older houses and foundations, they'll actually, if they find something, they'll actually put everything back the way they found it. They'll mix some mortar up and a little water, mix some mortar up, put the bricks back in place, and put some dirt on it, or nail boards back in place with the rusty nails they carry with them. They'll nail things back so you never know they were there. That's the creed of the treasure hunter, and it should be of the metal detectorist. It's not to leave any evidence you were there.
Right. You know? It's the work that they don't see.
That's a good. You coined that saying, I think, didn't you, Josh? That's a good saying. I'm gonna write that down, because it is. That's exactly it. You don't want to know they were there.
Yeah, it works great for permissions, because it's the work that they don't see that keeps us coming back.
That's exactly right. Another type of cache that was commonly used a lot, I think, during the 20s and the Great Depression of the 30s, was called a post hole bank. Now, probably a lot of people have heard of that. I don't know. I've talked to a few folks, and they go, well, a post hole bank, you know. So I guess a lot of people don't know about this. But one of the easiest ways for farmers and ranchers to put away their savings, either in cash or coin or silver or whatever, you know, once again, whatever was valuable to them. And usually it was cash, because they didn't like to give the bank any type of money to keep from, because banks were not very honest then. And I guess nothing much has changed now, I guess. But they would actually go out and count the number of posts they had, you know, because back all the way from the 19th century, mid-19th century, up until still today, you know, they drive the posts into the ground, and they put the barbed wire around it to keep the cattle and the cows and the ostriches, whatever they're raising. We actually have some ostrich farms here in Florida. Just in case you need one. I know where I can get you an ostrich cheap, Josh. But they would actually count the number of poles or the posts, and they would go down, and they, even with the wire around it, they would go down and they dig up the post, saw the bottom off of it, because usually the bottom of the post they would hack, like, you know, it's a point, you know, so you can pound the thing into the ground. But
Right.
they dull the bottom of the post, again, out of sight, on a part of the land. Nobody could see them do it, and they'd secrete a box or a jar or a crock or something. And then they'd put the post back down, and then they'd cover it. And some people would make a map of it and pass that down, like, you know, if something happens to me and they try to get the house, well, here, you know, the 28th post from the north acre there, you know, count down to 28, and that's where all the gold is or whatever. And most of them were recovered, but a lot of them weren't. You know, again, somebody would die suddenly. You know, 19th century was a pretty dangerous century. You know, it didn't matter what you did. Most people ended up fairly dead at an early age. You know, the typhus and the flu in the early 20th century. That flu killed everybody. So a lot of people, thousands and thousands and thousands of people passed and never had a chance to go back and look for their cash. And it was a fairly common method of secreting your money so you and your family knew where it was. But sometimes the family didn't know. Like the guy down in Miami. He's like, Grandpa never told us what he did with it. Grandma said we had lots and lots of gold coins, and we would like to find them. So,
and it seems, too, that sometimes they never even know that the money had been cashed in the first place, or no one's around to even mention it to anybody, like with the incident at the planter.
That's right. That's exactly right. A lot of times nothing was said. It was the cash hunting and treasure hunting. True, we had the old loose lips sink ships. It's the same thing. You know, you keep quiet about what's going on, what you find, what you bury. You know, I'm not putting it on Facebook. Believe me.
Right. Yeah, we are a very secretive community in certain aspects.
Well, metal detectors aren't so much, because everybody's excited about the hobby and everybody wants to share their finds, which nothing wrong with that. But there are still people that make a living from treasure hunting, and they
absolutely.
Yeah, and you wouldn't know it because they're not going to tell you. You know, sometimes they get permission to hunt places, sometimes they don't. If they think something's on there, I was reading another story about a guy. He was looking for, we call them, like I said, projects. He was looking for a specific buried cache on this specific piece of land, and it was owned by somebody else. And he got permission to hunt it, but he didn't get permission to hunt it as a treasure hunter. He got permission to hunt. He actually made up a story that he was a biologist from an odd named university, and he had binoculars, and he dressed like a wildlife guy, and he would look for the locations that he thought the cache might be buried in. And he'd go out there, and he would collect squirrels, and he'd band them. He'd do all this elaborate biological stuff. Meanwhile, he was looking for that cache. And I think he finally found it, and and he recovered it and covered up his tracks. And the guy that wrote the article said he's sure a lot of universities had no idea where they had gotten crates and crates of gray squirrels from wherever it was he was looking. But a lot of treasure hunters, right? A lot of treasure hunters will come up with a secret identity, like Superman. You know, I don't want you to know who I really am, and I'll go around and I'll clean your farm for you. I'll be the milk guy, but I'm looking for something that's buried around the barn. Now, a lot of people say, you know, that's pretty dishonest, you know, and I don't know. It's hard to say. You know, ask yourself if the people that own the land don't know it's there, you know, and you know it's there, you know, who has a right to it? Well, I guess the landowners do, and I guess in a lot of cases, guys will say, hey, you know, I think I know where there's something on your property that we could split it, and they'll create a contract. But the problem with that a lot of times, and it happened not long ago, if you remember that cache, and it was a cache, the couple found in California gold coins when they're out walking their dog.
Yes, that was big news. Yeah, and it shouldn't have been, you know. Right. And I don't believe they were the ones that told anybody. I think they had a numismatist. I don't even know how to. What do they call it? A numismatist.
Numismatist?
Yes.
They hypnotize you and take your coins. Numismatist. But they went to the numismatist, and he's the one that blew the deck off the ship with the gold coins. And that's when the news media, you know, I think he was pushing his business, like, I'm grading some really high, you know, mint value coins here, and that's when the
look at me,
got a hold of it. Yeah, you don't want. No, they weren't his coins. You know, they were the couple had given that to him. They found it clandestinely. It was nobody's business but theirs. And then as soon as you let the treasure out of the bag, as soon as you open your mouth, people come out of the woodwork,
and it spreads like wildfire.
That's right. And then all of a sudden, there was one case where a cache was found of gold coins. I think they were in the 30s, like 1930 golden eagles or something. And the government found out about it because they couldn't keep their traps closed about it. And the government claimed that, and this woman had inherited it from her father who had found them. And the government claimed that at that point in time, they had recalled all the gold coins to have them melted down because gold was to be used. So basically, those gold coins were stolen. They were illegal gold coins, and that's how they got the coins away from them. Even though gold isn't illegal anymore.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, I believe that was somewhere in the neighborhood of around a dozen double eagles that were in a safe deposit box.
Right. It wasn't a huge amount. I mean, I guess for gold.
Well, that's still a good amount. Yeah.
Right, still a good amount, and the point is, don't talk about it. You know,
right?
We had a guy down here in Florida that found a ship not too far offshore that had been carrying a bunch of Colombian emeralds. I mean, really high quality emeralds, right? And he'd been diving on the thing for 10 years, right? So he brought back some, and he was trying to get funding to have a project where he could go out and pull them in. You know, I'd like to fund a boat, you know, and that's a cache too, I guess you could say. It's been hidden for a while, not on purpose, because, you know, they got torpedoed or something. But, you know, he opened his mouth, and the next thing you know, the government was on him, and, you know, Ecuador was on him, and everybody wanted it. And by the time he gets done paying legal fees, he's going to owe money. So
yeah, exactly. He's got nothing. He's in the hole.
Right. So, and a lot of people get angry about, you know, the treasure hunters, you know, we're sneaking around, we're digging stuff up. But if you don't know it's lost, how can it be yours? You know? I mean, how can it be yours? If it's, you know, if you didn't know it was there and somebody recovers it, what are you mad about? You know, how can it be? Remember, what was that other, Marine Odyssey? Remember them over here in Tampa, Florida?
Odyssey Marine Explorations, recoverers of the USS Republic, the Black Swan Project. I've followed Odyssey for years.
Right. And do you recall finding that Spanish ship and pulling all those gold coins ashore and spending millions of dollars recovering that ship that was like 2,000 or 3,000 feet deep? And the Spanish government wanted all those coins back. They claimed
buckets full.
Right, buckets full. And Marine Odyssey, they had spent a lot of money on that project and rightfully recovered it.
Absolutely. That even got them pulled into Spanish Port a couple of times.
Right. And they were in international waters. So I guess I'm getting off track with this, but it POs me off when I see the U.S. say, yeah, give it back to Spain. You know, honestly, if it hadn't been me, I would have pulled that ship back out there and heaved all that stuff overboard and say, we put it back on your ship for you. You can have it now. There you go.
Yeah, because like you said, it is a little off topic, but if I remember right, Spain couldn't even prove the identity of that ship or definitely that it was theirs. They just kept claiming it was.
Right. It was a diplomatic some kind of thing. But the problem is with those kind of rulings, when somebody does find a cache, it makes people go underground. Nobody's going to talk about it anymore.
Exactly. That's what kind of sours people on it.
Right. Now, all that serves to do is to make sure you're not going to know next time when we recover this, because we're not going to tell anybody. You know, so you shouldn't have done that. If they'd asked for a portion of it, or they wanted to pay a portion of the cost to find it, okay, cool. We'll share some of it with you since it was from your government, or give you some for museum quality. But now that's how that works in this country, which is a big problem. Like in Britain, I mean, in England, and we have a lot of members of our club that go over to England regularly, they recover caches that the Romans buried. You know, you see it all the time in the news, right? Oh, yeah,
Romans, Saxon hordes.
Right. 12-year-old kid out there with a mine lab, you know, he digs up a big, pot, and the archaeologists come out, and they get paid for it. You find a pot of gold out there, or a pot of silver Roman coins that's worth 500,000 pounds, which is, $1 million U.S., the landowner gets half of that, and the guy who finds it gets the other half, and the British Museum gets it, right? They buy it from you. Here, if you did that, you'd be thrown in jail as a criminal, and they just take it and do with it what they want.
And they just confiscate it. Or run it through the courts long enough that you don't have the money to fight.
Right. So they wonder why people are looting things, and because, I mean, if you're honest about it, you get thrown in jail and they take it anyway. So
yeah, I guess it boils down to it's the old fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me adage.
Same thing. See, the same thing with Comcast here. I told you I can't come back on Comcast. This is a third strike for Comcast. So I'm going to Bright House Networks. They just lost me. They just lost a profitable, because they're being, they're kind of underhanded about it. So that's what why people don't make a big deal out of treasure hunting, because it's not profitable and it gets you in a lot of trouble. Now, what I would advocate, if you find a good chunk of money, and there's ways of, I guess we used to call it disposing of the treasure, you still should pay your taxes. If you found that money, you should pay taxes on it. You calculate how much, and send a check to the government, because if they find out you got it, that's one of the only ways they can get you. You didn't pay taxes on it. So you should always actually, believe it or not, if you find a hoard of coins that's worth $20,000 or $30,000, you should write a check to the IRS. I know. Everybody's going like, what? But you really ought to. You really should, because then you're legal. And
it does help to keep you in the good graces of Uncle Sam.
Yeah, well, maybe not. I don't know.
True.
Huh?
Very true.
There's other types of caches too that are not buried caches. Now, there's all kinds of sneaky ways to hide stuff. And, the folks in the 19th century, I think, were a lot better than we are, because we spend all our time staring at little digital screens and, and everything's done for us now electronically. One of the sneakier ways, and a lot of people don't know about this, and I think a lot of these get destroyed when these very, very old houses get bulldozed and they pour concrete and build a CVS drug on that site, is that people used to use what they called either a wire bank or a wall pendant. They used to be called a lot of times. And what you do in that case is you take usually that was with currency. You get some currency, you get a couple $100. Back in the old days, remember when the money was actually worth something, when they were silver certificates, and before that, U.S. money was gold certificates. You could actually take that money to your local bank with gold or silver certificates and get that amount in silver.
Absolutely,
now we have
because it was back.
Right. What do we have now? Federal notes or play money or whatever it is now. But they would actually they would take a piece of coat hanger wire or thin wire, and they'd bend that sucker into an L shape at the end. And then they'd wrap their money, the silver certificates or gold certificates, around this wire. And then they would wrap around that some oilskin, and then they'd tie that up all real tight with string. And then what they do is they'd actually push it through the hole, so the money and all the currency went into the wall, and an L, and then they would actually paste some, not mortar, what am I thinking?
Plaster.
Plaster. Mortar, plaster. Anyway, they put some plaster over it, and they would make it just enough so it was raised a little bit, like it's a little, like a little bump. Now, if they didn't wallpaper the place, if it had already been plastered, and some houses were, as well as their occupants were plastered, but the walls were plastered, you could find those with a UV light. You could take a UV light along the wall, and then when you'll see a little bright spot, and that may or may not be, a wall pendant. You can break that off and pull that straight out, and they have some pretty nice, valuable currency in there. Another way they used to do that is they would wallpaper over it. And again, this was something they could get in a hurry if they needed it. In most cases they knew where it was on the wall anyway, and nobody else would even notice a bump under the wallpaper.
Yeah, especially if they had a picture hanging over it or something.
See, I never thought of that either. You sure you don't want to come on cash hunts with us a little bit? Because I think you'd be a valuable member. I mean, I wasn't thinking of that. But, after the house, of course, had been abandoned and everything, it was pretty much wreckage. So we had a device that we made out of a 4-foot piece of 2x4, drilled some holes in it and put some rope through them, almost like an oxen. What they call those? The oxen. You put the two. I don't know. I'm not a farmer.
Oh, like an oxen yoke.
An oxen yoke. Doggone it. I'm just going to sit back and let you talk for a while. You got all the good answers. I don't seem to be having as many answers tonight as I should. But yes, it was like if you turn it upside down, it looked like an oxen yoke. What you do is you put your hands through the rope to hold the 2x4, and you'd lean against the 2x4 and you'd push it along the wall, even if it had wallpaper. And a lot of times you'd hit a bump, and it would scrape the wallpaper off, and you'd find a little nodule, and you break that off, and by George, there's a wall pendant. It's all wrapped up. Sometimes you find Confederate money. Sometimes you find silver certificates and gold certificates, which are still worth a lot more to collectors, I think, now than their actual value. And I don't think they'll give you gold for it. I think you take it in there, they'll probably just arrest you with it. But
either that or give you common cash for it, and
right. I'll take that gold certificate and give you like 1,000 worthless notes for that.
Which, in my opinion, I think I'd rather have the gold certificate, but
hey, to each their own. Right there. Right, that's a good decision. So that was another method of secreting items, and it was called a pendant because it didn't go all the way through to the other wall. It would basically go halfway through the wall with the money on it. It would just hang in there. It was like a pendant.
Yeah, just hang in the cavity of the wall.
Right. And I'd never heard of that before. I talked to a guy who was like in his late 90s, and he was talking about his dad. He had a lot of wall pendants. And I'm like, what do you mean? He hung up a lot of what? I was picturing jewelry. I'm like, wow, where is this house? And he says, no.
Right.
I thought he had a bunch of silver pendants all hanging up all my daddy's wall pendant. And it was basically, a piece of wire with currency wrapped around it, jammed in a wall with a little bump, so you knew it was there. And a lot of people, again, died or the house burned down. You'd want to get that sucker out of there in a hurry. Had a couple $100 in gold certificates. You knew right where it was. You'd go right down there and you'd break it off with your finger and pull that thing out and run like heck. There's a cabin burned in or nothing. But,
yeah, absolutely. You wouldn't want to leave it there.
Right. And again, I can't stress enough the use of landmarks when you're outside looking for caches. And you don't have to be elaborate. You don't have to get colored carpenter string and line them all up and look for it. You can eyeball most of this stuff and say, I'm probably around here. If I was going to bury something, it would be out here. And wander around, and a lot of times you'll get a signal, and it'll be a mason jar full of Morgan dollars. So You know, a lot of people go over that and they'll say, "Oh, that's tin." You know, well, yeah, the lid is tin. You know, but there's a whole bunch of silver underneath that.
Which is a very good point. I think sometimes a lot of these are just walked right over because people don't necessarily understand what they're picking up on. And that's one of the reasons why a lot of times you do want to dig everything, because that could be masking the target.
Right, it could very well be, especially in an area where you're not getting many other signals. You know, you've been hunting and wandering around the detector, and you got nothing. So you have to go and you have to start somewhere. You can't just go into a site and just start at one end and sit there all day and scan back and forth and back and forth. Chances are you're going to miss it if you do that anyway. You need to start thinking like a 19th century citizen and not a 21st century citizen. If I was in a hurry and I needed to get that stuff dug up, where would I put it? What's the easiest place? Out the back door? You know, 10 paces. A lot of people pace things off then. You know, 10 paces. Well, maybe you got bigger feet or smaller feet. I don't know. But I used to 10 pace off a lot. I used 154, 629, 10. You know, and then scan it. You know, but
right, and it could at least get you into the general area.
Right, and in some places there were no caches at all. You know, I mean, you just had to catch cache 10. Hey, that was good. Caches cache 10.
There you go.
I think I trumped you on one of your sayings there. But you know, and loose boards. A lot of times they put things behind loose boards on the exterior of the house. You know, up there you got shaker roofs and things like that. And, there was one case where one guy put a lot of money in a sardine can, and he put the sardine can in the middle of his the couple of sardine cans with lots of coins in the oil box or the transmission of his windmill, and he dropped them in the oil. Now, would you even think about opening a transmission of a windmill and stick your hand in there to see what's in there? Probably not. They're pretty safe there.
I've even heard of them being hid in barrels of oil.
Yeah, that's really a bummer. How do you know, you get your buddy to go look for that while you're standing there taking notes. You don't want to be doing that yourself.
Right.
But yeah, you can hide them. You can hide stuff anywhere. You know, the guys who are probably pretty good at cache hunting are drug smugglers, because they're always finding all kinds of ways to hide things, to sneak things around. So you bring one of them on site and say, where would you hide it? You know, maybe they can spot it for you.
And it just goes to show you too that the possibilities for potential cache locations really are endless. It's all on the creativity of the cache hider.
Right. That's exactly right. But, again, there are a couple of limitations they have to follow. It's got to be recoverable because they don't have metal detectors. They have to be able to find it in a hurry. And if they're not there and they're in California and something's happening and they may not make it back, they're going to write a letter to Aunt Millie and say, here's where I hid the cache. You know, go from the second elm tree, go 10 paces, and then go 5 paces to the right and dig right there, and that's where it is. You know, a lot of them didn't leave maps. It was all in their heads, and that's why so many of them went unfound.
Or lost.
Or lost, right, because I don't write a map. I took all this time to hide it. Why would I want to make a map that somebody might find and go and dig it up? So that's another reason so many caches go unfound. And it amazes me that people will find an old farm and they'll hunt it and they'll run around look for coins when they ought to really take a shot at looking for a cache around the house somewhere.
Right.
You know?
It could be something as simple as, say, the farmer's wife's egg money stash or something like that.
Right. One really sneaky way that a lot of people used to hide caches is they would take a cracker tin and they'd put, you know, I guess all the like Nabisco products came in tins back in the 1890s or 1870s or 60s, whatever, and they take all their money and they put a lot of coins mostly, and they take it and they go into the fireplace. You probably never heard of this one either. They go into their fireplace and they would put that sealed tin of coins above the flue, and they park it up there, and they could light a fire and everything, and then the heat just flows around the tent. It doesn't bother anything inside the tent. It might heat up, but it ain't going to hurt it. And if anybody finds it, I mean, nobody likes to stick their hands in that soot. So if anybody finds it, they're going to leave a hell of a trail to follow. You know, it's going to be soot everywhere, footprints.
Right.
But so if you ever run into an old house that has a fireplace, check above the flue, because that was
as well as the hearth in front of the fireplace and the mantel.
Right, in front of the fireplace, in front of the hearth, especially for the older buildings that at one time had dirt floors and then were refitted with wooden floors. That cache may still be there under the floorboards by the hearth in the front, and you can probably detect that from without removing the wood. But you know, all those iron nails sometimes will mask a signal.
That's true.
So, yeah. So, like you said, there are many places people would cache money and valuables or whatever was valuable to them. Some may not have any, monetary value. Some may have an intrinsic value to them as a sentimental part of their lives or something that they thought was valuable. They didn't want to fall into the wrong hands or be stolen. And safes cost a lot of money back then, and most people couldn't afford them. They needed, their money for food and groceries and, whatever the basics of life were. So
yeah, it was rough times. People worked hard for it.
Right.
They wanted to keep a hold of it.
And one thing 19th century people did a lot more than 20th century, late 20th century people and early 21st century folks is saved money. They saved a portion of their income. Like today, I don't know too many people that put money away for the future.
Right.
When we were kids, it was always like, make sure you put money away for your future. And again, they handled a lot of hard currency back in the 19th century.
Absolutely, especially those that grew up in the 20s and 30s.
Right. There's a lot of hard currency out there, and a lot of times that's why you find lost coins from that era, because if you're wearing older clothes, those things would wear a hole in your pocket, literally. And they used to call spending money, you're spending money like you got a hole in your pocket was an old saying. A lot of people actually did have holes in their pockets, and I can't imagine the anguish that they felt when they had a silver dollar, which was a lot of money back in the 20s, and got home and found it had been lost somewhere. I can't imagine how badly they would feel, and how badly beaten they would be too, once Dad came home.
Yeah, so, absolutely.
Right.
I guess I'm going to open up the phone lines for a few minutes. If any of the listeners have any questions or any interjections they'd like to make on this too, as well as ideas or whatever, 419-549-5744. If you'd like to add anything to it, or if you've got a question, give us a shout, let us know. We've still got a few minutes left. And I guess while we're waiting to see if anyone does have any questions, maybe you'd like to take a few minutes and talk about the cache that was shown in the video. We found a cache on a Monday, or even the planter cache that you had experience with, and we'll see what happens. It could give listeners some ideas of what they may find, or even how to find it, because with the video of we found a cache on a Monday, that wasn't exactly a good clear signal. It was a little mixed, whereas the planter cache was just slamming.
Oh yeah, and if you're going to be a cache hunter, especially folks that use Garrett equipment, Garrett actually makes a 2-box attachment, and I can't remember which model it makes it for. But I was over at Kellyco the other day wandering around, wondering, how many more detectors I could possibly buy before my wife kicks me out. And there was a nice 2-box, and it's I don't know if you've ever seen a 2-box. It's a big square antenna, 2 antennas on the end of. They're like a big square antenna. One is perpendicular to the ground, and the other one is horizontal to the ground. In the middle, you plug your detector in.
Yeah, for those who haven't seen it, do a Google search for the Garrett Groundhog.
Yeah, I think
sure that'll give you a good example.
Yeah, several newer models also, because it's designed to take the shaft off your Garrett machine and just snap that on there, plug in your coil, and you've got a really nice cache hunting instrument, especially out in places where we hunted, because we used them, but we didn't have we couldn't just switch antennas and switch coils like that. Then we had to have an entire dedicated 2-box unit.
Yes, the White's TM808, I believe, was another 2-box. We've got a caller. Right. Go ahead, caller.
Hello, Josh.
Mr. Engel.
How you doing, sir?
All right.
Great show tonight. And Jim, thank you very much for all the input. I'll tell you, there's some good things you said that I didn't even consider. I found very interesting. Very interesting.
Well, I'm glad you liked it. Yeah, a lot of, cache hunting doesn't get a lot of PR. And and a lot of people don't like to talk about it because it's a small group that does it. But they're to me, I like to spend some time working along those lines because I'm a treasure hunter. I'm not just a detector. I'm looking for treasure. And I got a lot of quarters and silver coins, but I'd like to pad the coffer a little bit here and there when you can.
Yeah, and it would be fun if you're out, like say, at an old home site or something like that, and you're just strictly looking for coins or whatever, to take notice of what you had said. Think about, well, where would I bury it? Take that string line, put it out there, because, like you said, people didn't trust banks, or there wasn't a bank around.
That's right.
So true. They buried it. But anyway, like I say, great show tonight, Josh. Jim, thank you for all the info, and I'm going to get off here so somebody else can get on.
All right. Thanks for the call, Chris.
All right. Take care.
Thanks for calling. Bye-bye. Take care.
And that's a good point, too. Like Chris said, he never really gave that much thought hunting some of these old home sites and stuff. Sometimes it pays to kind of just take a minute and look around at your surroundings, at where you're at. Try to get a better idea of the lay of the land, maybe where the house stood if it's no longer there, or if it is there. Another good point, when you're out there, say in the backyard or maybe even the side yard that may be out of the eyes of bypassers, look at areas that are in line of sight of a window of the house, because a lot of times if it was cached outside, they liked it to be somewhere where they could just look out and make sure that it hadn't been tampered with.
Exactly. Another really good site for cache, to hide caches outside, was under flagstones. If you had a backyard and they had flagstones that went out a certain ways, the 6 or 7 flagstones, they count the 3rd or 4th flagstone and they'd bury it under the flagstone and then put the flagstone back down.
Right, so, because there again, quick access, you could just pick up the flagstone, grab it, and go.
Right, you wouldn't even have to, you'd probably bury it at, a couple of inches, and then put that thing over it, and nobody's going to know it's there. Nobody's going to pick those things up. We park we hunt here in Orlando, we have found several, because there were houses in some of these parks that are now public parks. There were houses there 120 years ago around these lakes, and we continually run into old flagstones, that were, and we always scan around them things. It's like, did somebody put something underneath this, or But well, most of the time we come away with nothing, but worth a try.
And speaking of looking around, taking time to look around at your surroundings, we've got a caller on now that's pretty proficient at doing that. How's it going, caller?
Man, it's going good, Josh. This is a great show. Love listening to you guys and about these caches.
Well, hopefully it's given the listeners a little different food for thought. We figured we'd mix it up a little bit this week, throw a curveball, something that you don't hear a lot of people talk about sometimes.
Right. Just one thing. I just called in to throw this out here because I'm listening to these, possible spots to find these caches and these hide spots. I know of an instance that happened in Tennessee years ago. And the way the guy figured it out, now I think he heard a little something about it could possibly be that way, but he did do it himself. And how he found this cache on this farm, it was about a 250-acre farm, is they measured, and it was pretty much a four-corner farm, and he measured all four corners to the center of the property, and that's where they found the cache.
Oh, good point.
And
yeah, that's what I was talking about with the,
right,
with the guy that was probably triangulated. That's and he's probably a little bit more educated than a normal person would be to think of something like that. And that's a good point. Exactly, exact center, huh?
Right.
Wow.
Yeah, it was dead center. So the landowner at the time, you know, obviously knew his property. There wasn't any trees there or anything. It was an open pasture, and it was buried in a buttermilk urn.
Nice. And being exact center of the property without any trees necessarily nearby would ensure the safety and security of the cache, not as apt to be recovered by someone other.
What got me about the story was, now this was, you know, this was decades. This was a long time ago. So this guy had no survey, he had to literally, I don't know, maybe he stepped it off. I don't know. But to be right in the center, that took some pretty good engineering on his part, however he did it. But I just wanted to throw that out there to you. I'm going to get off and finish the show. I've got Shiloh hunting coming up Friday and Saturday, and another hunt with Mr. Bob here from Kansas City tomorrow. So I'm going to get off here and finish the show, and it's good listening to you guys.
All right. Thanks for the call.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
That is pretty good to be dead center of the property like that. And people they'll use any avenue and means possible like that. There was even a cache some years ago down there in Florida where the gentleman had been known to have secreted a number of silver coins as well as other items. And apparently when he passed, somebody forced access to the property trying to recover these caches, and they didn't find it all. All they found, I believe, were the firearms that I'm thinking may have been hidden in some heating ducts or something, but the coins were not found until people with detectors got in there and recovered them for the estate.
That's right. That's right. Hiding the cache and there's all the reasons. You know, when I was in basic training in the Air Force, we used to, and this is actually got to do with cache hunting. Our drill instructors, we used to wash the flight's uniforms. We had a couple of guys in laundry, and we used to use these tablets. I don't remember, you know, if you recall the tablets. They were like I forget what they're called, but they looked like big aspirins. And you drop them in, you got two of them in the washer, and it was easy to measure out. It wasn't messy, you know. And they came in little boxes. So we had 42 guys or 45 guys in our flight, you know, in our troop, and they had a big box. It was like a sandbox, right? And it was like a big, what were those puzzles? Remember the puzzles you'd flip over, the big Rubik's Cube? Kind of like that. And they put all the boxes in this big sandbox, the big box with all the smaller boxes. And I told the guys, my job in basic was to get rid of the trash, the lint and all the garbage we'd clean up, you know, and the drill instructors would come on down and look for it. So I told one of the guys in the crew, the laundry crew, I said, look, save me one of them boxes, don't throw it out. And I want you to mark the corner with a laundry marker. So they did. So what I do is, you know, they come down there, the drill instructor come down there and beat everybody to hell, you know. I take the garbage and I rush into the thing and I dump all the garbage in this one little box with a mark on it, and I'd move it around like a Rubik's Cube. So it was never in the same place. And those drill instructors looked everywhere and couldn't find. And I remember Sergeant, I forget what was his name, Sergeant Rogers, he come over to me and says, I'm going to find this slick. And when I do, you're going to know what pain is. And I'm like, yes, sir. And all the way through basic training, the guy never figured it out. We were in a hospital. I was in a base hospital, and he was there too. He was long after basic. He goes, "Hey, what did you do with all that trash? We could never find it." And I told him what he did. I said, it was a cache. I moved it around. And he goes, "I'll be damned." He said, "We're not going to do that anymore. We're going to just get big boxes of Tide. No more little boxes." Oh, damn. I ruined it for everybody else. But I'm okay, fine. Another place to hide money that nobody would ever think of that we found once was, and you have this up there again, this is another northern thing, not so much here, is you got a gate. You got those wire gates. You open them wire gates. It's a metal, you got the metal tubes, the like steel tubes and
yeah.
on top.
Yeah.
Right? Well, you unscrew the top of one of those and you stack like about 40 or 50 silver dollars in there and you screw it back down.
Right.
Yep.
That's
there you
true.
Go.
I have heard of that.
They're waterproof. Nobody bothers them. Nobody knows they're there. When you need them, you just unscrew the bottom cap and it'll come out. So,
not to mention a little difficult for a metal detector to pick up on.
Well, yeah. It'd be pretty hard to detect them with a metal detector with the pipe, inside the pipe. And so you never even, not that they were thinking that way, but it was like, like again, we're talking about hiding in plain sight. Nobody even think to look in there.
Mm-hmm.
They figure it's buried out back or under something. And sometimes it was, but, and you do that in the dark. It's dark. You go out there at night and pitch black and you dump all your coins in there and screw it back on and nobody notices it. People have been walking through the gate for years and there's, $60,000 worth of silver inside those pipes. Nobody ever knew it.
Well, and speaking of which, sometimes the cache is even right there in plain sight.
That's right.
The name escapes me right now. I believe it may have been Carl Mueller.
Oh, yeah. Carl von Mueller?
Yeah, I believe. I could be wrong.
Probably.
But he was big on silver ore a lot of times. And he'd cart this all back to his house, and a lot of people never gave it any thought. And somebody asked him one day, said, "What are you doing with all that silver ore anyway?" They're standing outside talking, and he says, "Well, it's out here in plain view." He was bringing it home, laying it in his driveway.
I know nobody will look, right?
Right, exactly. Because, it's silver ore. Unless you know what you're looking for, you're not going to see it.
Well, that's right. If you want some real good, old-fashioned, still relevant information on any aspect of treasure hunting, when you go to book sales, look for Carl von Mueller's books. They were published in the early 60s, I think 62, 63. He wrote Treasure Hunter's Manual 1 through 7, I think.
Right.
But they're collectors. I happen to have two of them that I bought brand new back in the 70s. And they are something to read. This guy, he doesn't hold any punches.
Right. And that's why I say I believe it may have been him. I could be wrong on the name. It may have been another treasure hunter or metal detectorist. But I believe it was him.
Yeah.
But it just goes to show sometimes they're even out there in plain sight. You just never know. That's why you have to keep an open mind, keep all your options open, because chance does favor preparedness.
Right. Well, here's a chapter 10, by Carl von Mueller from the Treasure Hunter's Manual, number 6. This is what we were talking about earlier, and it's just a short paragraph. And what he says is, under publicity and secrecy, he says, there is something about treasure hunting that is like a disease. The bug may bite and bring about a violent temporary reaction, or it may result in brief, intermittent spasms of treasure-itis, or a severe chronic infliction may occur whereby the victim, and there's a question mark here, pursues a treasure hunting avocation with consistent diligence to the end of his time. The very nature of treasure hunting, with all its implications, requires that every bona fide search must be conducted with the utmost care and secrecy. This is especially true for buried treasure, which might be located on private property, or treasure which might be located on public property, but which may have legal strings attached through existence of legal heirs or estate of the party or parties who originally deposited the treasure. And his titles are parasites, botanists, watch. I mean, he was just an old-time writer. Broke.
That's a very good way to put it, though, actually, because for many of us, it is almost like a sickness. We have to get out there and preserve the past, preserve the history, whether it's in the form of relics or caches or jewelry. We have this, well, in a sense, it's almost like an addiction that we have to feed.
Right. Well, you know, when you were in school, you know, back in the old days, everybody has their old days. Well, some of us are older days than others, but back in school, you know, nobody liked history. Nobody liked history. You'd sit there and listen to that garbage go on and on and on. And then now later, as we're adults, and everybody's kind of getting into history, finding artifacts and things. Now everybody's, you know, they want to put the cuffs on you for finding it.
Right.
So it's like, what the heck happened in between the books and the reality? I don't know. But it's a fun hobby, and cache hunting especially. I really like, because it's like a lot of other disciplines. It's not just one. It takes several specialties, and being able to think analytically about a problem, and it has its rewards and it has its disappointments, like everything else in life. But I think, you know, you look at old newspapers, you know, find where some crooks stole something and secreted it and they never found it. You know, take a look. If it's within 5 or 10 miles of you, it's a good idea to read some more papers and look. So now we have so many tools at our disposal. You got Google Maps. You got geodesic survey maps you can call up with a finger on your computer. You know, you have all these modern GPS. I mean, if anybody can find it, we should be able to, you know, with a little bit of, and another piece of advice is get the heck off the computer sometimes and go to your local library and talk to some of the older folks that heard things from their parents, and that's how, you know, you know, one thing that just bugs me is people say, well, I did some research. I went on Google and I typed in caches. Where do I find caches? And then look for a map. You know, that's not how it's done. You know, right. Go to, especially historical societies. You know, we have some around here in Orlando, Florida, one over in Geneva, which is a pre-Civil War town, and Oviedo, and they've got some really interesting stuff. And they have some real interesting publications with old photos, old maps, a lot of stuff you can't find. As a matter of fact, last Saturday, Jerry and I and Bill Bergdahl, we tried out a new, and this is for cache hunting, a new, I don't know how new it is, maybe it's not, it's called Map
It's been around for a little bit.
Right, and it was, I guess, originally tasked for skiers, to find your skier buddy when he wiped out or went off the cliff. You could find him with it. But I did a video that we're going to put on YouTube soon. I'll copy you on it, and it's called Maprika. I just come up with these esoteric names. Maprika, Your Path to the Past, which I thought was a nice tongue tie.
Right.
And we actually drove all over Orlando and Sanford and Lake Mary with this, using this program to locate one 1870s or 1890s schoolhouse we found was about a quarter mile away from a approach radar for Orlando International Airport. We're standing there, and you can hear the radar go, and it says posted, you know, federal property. I said to Jerry, I don't think this is going to end well if we get our detectors out here.
That's right.
But that's an amazing program. I mean, you can use maps from the 1800s, the 1900s. Man, it is amazing stuff.
And you're right, it is another handy asset. We are armed now with more technology than ever to assist us in things like this. So the tools are at our disposal. We just have to put our time in, do our research, and get out there and dig it.
That's right. I look at all those tools as attachments to your main tool, which is your brain.
Right.
Those are all tools for your brain to use. The main thing is thinking about it and using a little bit of logic.
That's right.
Not depending on digital sources. Think a little bit about it, survey the property, and let it percolate. You don't have to find it tomorrow or even next week. Projects can last for 2 or 3 months as you slowly piece together where these might be hidden and how to get there and how to stay out of federal prison when you find it.
Exactly.
So
hopefully this has been some interesting food for thought for the listeners, and it's definitely always a pleasure to have you on the show. Jim, do you have anything in closing?
No, I'd just like to get my computer running again. That would be really nice.
Right, definitely.
Comcast is still messing with me here, man. I'm telling you.
Okay.
But it just basically is, it's still not well. I don't believe there's that many people doing it now, and we're watching here in Central Florida, of course. Everything's getting plowed under here. We noticed the other day a site we hunted that were concrete pads for old buildings. They're all tagged. All the trees are tagged. So that means they're going to plow that thing up and they're going to destroy that entire area and put it under more concrete. You're not going to be able to find anything that was there for another couple of 100 years when that CVS is outdated in 2120. They knocked that down again. So,
exactly. We're losing more and more ground to modern development.
Right.
Hang in there. Right.
The archaeologists are being real quiet about it, which is amazing to me that they wouldn't be looking for a few things from historic areas before they get plowed under, but they don't. I don't get it. And that's all I have to say, Josh. That's it.
All right, well, hang in there with me for a few minutes, Jim.
Okay.
Folks, Jim Fielding, always great to hear from him. Very informative topic tonight. Very interesting topic, I do believe. And a little different flavor of candy for the treasure hunting mind. If you're in the Central Florida area, make sure and check out the CFMDC at the CFMDC.com. Great club down there. If you're in the Central Florida area, you may even be interested in checking out their Facebook group, also not hard to find. And check out Jim's channel, SQ Engineer, on YouTube. He does a really great job with his videos. He's got some detecting videos up there, some evidence search videos, and all of that. If you enjoyed the show, by all means, please rate the channel, throw us a comment, send me a message. If you'd like to be a guest on the show or have an interesting topic you'd like to hear covered, hit me up. You never know. We'll see what we can do. For the rest of us, Dirt Bandit will be out hunting Shiloh again soon. Check out his YouTube videos on his YouTube channel at Dirt Bandit 33. And, hey, for the rest of us, myself, Jim Fielding, I gotta roll. It's almost time for my little bit of a jaunt in the torture chamber. But hopefully, everyone enjoyed the show. We'll see you next time, folks. We're out of here.